In 2015, a 19-year-old college applicant requested her birth certificate for a scholarship application and discovered something impossible. The document showed her birth date as May 14, 1996. Place of birth unknown. Mother's name blank. When she brought it to the agency that had processed her adoption, a worker glanced at the paper and said quietly, "Back in those years, some files came through deliberately incomplete." That single sentence told her everything. Her past had not been lost by accident. Someone had erased it on purpose. This is the story of an identity stolen, a mother who never stopped searching, and a criminal network that made children disappear. Of how a routine document request unraveled 16 years of lies and revealed a truth no one was prepared to face. May 2015, Portland, Oregon. Brittany Walsh sat at her bedroom desk, staring at the birth certificate that had arrived 3 days earlier. She had requested it for her university scholarship applications, FICTIONAL, standard requirement for financial aid verification. The envelope had come from the Idaho Bureau of Vital Records, official and stamped, the kind of document that was supposed to answer questions, not create them. But the certificate raised more questions than it answered. Birth date? May 14th, 1996. That part matched what she had always been told, but the rest looked like someone had given up halfway through filling it out. Place of birth? Unknown. Mother's name? Blank. Father's name? Blank. Attending physician? None listed. Brittany had always known she was adopted. Her parents, David and Susan Walsh, had told her when she was 7 years old, sitting her down at the kitchen table with gentle voices and careful words. They said she was special, that being adopted meant being chosen, that they loved her completely. She had accepted it easily back then, had never felt the burning need to search for her biological family. Her childhood in Portland had been stable, filled with piano, lessons and family dinners and summer vacations to the coast. But this birth certificate felt wrong. Not just incomplete, but deliberately vague in a way that made her uneasy. She went downstairs where her mother was preparing dinner. Susan Walsh looked up from chopping vegetables and smiled, then saw the paper in Brittany's hand, and the smile faded. "Mom, can we talk about this?" Susan took the certificate carefully. Read it once, then again. Something shifted in her expression. "What about it, honey?" "It doesn't list where I was born, or who my birth mother was. Is that normal?" Susan set the paper down and turned back to the vegetables. "Sometimes the information isn't complete, especially with older adoptions." "But why would everything be blank?" "The agency told us your birth mother wanted to remain anonymous." Brittany heard the careful tone in her mother's voice, the way she was not quite meeting her eyes. "Can I contact the agency?" Susan's hands stilled on the cutting board. "Brittany, please, let this go. I just want to understand where I came from." Susan turned around, and there was something in her face that Brittany had never seen before. Fear, maybe, or something close to it. "What if the answers hurt? What if you find out things that make everything harder?" "Why would knowing hurt?" "Because sometimes the past should stay in the past." Susan sat down at the table, gesturing for Brittany to join her. "When you first came to us, you were 3 years old. You had nightmares for months. You barely spoke. It took years for you to feel safe here." "I don't remember any of that." "I know, and maybe that's a blessing. But your father and I watched you heal, slowly, piece by piece. I don't want to see you go through that pain again." "I need to know, Mom. I can't just pretend this doesn't matter." Susan looked at her daughter for a long moment. "The agency was called Idaho Children's Services, but Brittany, please be careful. Some doors shouldn't be opened. If you have ever been warned against seeking the truth, you know how those words can sound like both protection and threat. That night, Brittany lay in bed, unable to sleep. Her mother's words kept circling through her mind. Nightmares, trauma, years of healing. What had happened to her before the Walshes took her in? She thought about the blank spaces on her birth certificate. Place of birth. Unknown. As if she had appeared from nowhere at 3 years old, with no history, no origin, no story. The next morning, Brittany told her parents she was visiting a friend. Instead, she drove east toward Idaho. 4 hours across state lines, into territory she had never visited, but that apparently held the beginning of her story. The address for Idaho Children's Services led her to a low brick building on the outskirts of Boise, with a sign reading Intermountain Care Center. Inside, a woman at the front desk looked up with a polite smile. "Can I help you? I'm looking for information about an adoption processed through Idaho Children's Services." The woman's smile became more careful. "Idaho Children's Services closed in 2003. We took over some case files, but not all of them. What year?" 1999, August. "And you were the child?" "Yes." The woman typed into her computer, frowning. "Your adoptive name and birth date?" "Brittany Walsh, May 14th, 1996. More typing. The frown deepened. "I'm showing a file, but it's marked incomplete. Not much here." "Can you tell me anything? Who brought me in? Where I came from?" The woman hesitated, glancing at the screen. "It says you were placed by a family member who stated the mother was unable to care for you. No names listed. The caseworker was Helen Marsh, but she hasn't worked here in years. Why is everything blank? Sometimes records from that era were poorly maintained." Brittany leaned forward. "Please, there has to be something." The woman looked at her for a long moment, then around the empty lobby. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. Back in those years, some files came through deliberately incomplete. Not by accident. There were rumors about placements that weren't entirely legal. Children coming in with paperwork that looked official but didn't hold up under scrutiny. Brittany felt cold. "Are you saying my adoption was illegal?" "I'm saying the paperwork raises questions. If you want real answers, you should contact the police." The woman wrote down a name and number. "Detective Mark Sullivan, Boise Police Department, Cold Case Unit. He handles historical investigations. If there's anything to find, he might help." Brittany took the note with shaking hands. She walked back to her car in a daze. Sat behind the wheel staring at the building. Deliberately incomplete. Not by accident. Our community of adoptees who discover their origins were obscured knows that moment when the ground shifts beneath you. When the life you thought was solid suddenly feels built on lies. Brittany drove back toward Portland as afternoon shadows lengthened. Her mind kept circling back to the worker's words. Files that came through deliberately incomplete. Placements that weren't entirely legal. She pulled off at a rest stop and called her father. "Brittany, where are you?" "I'm sorry, Dad. I lied. I drove to Idaho." Silence. "Why would you do that?" "Because nothing about my adoption makes sense. I went to the agency that processed it." "Brittany, they said the file was incomplete. They said there were rumors about illegal placements. Dad, did you know?" "No." David's voice was firm. "We went through proper channels. Everything was documented and legal as far as we knew." "But the paperwork is incomplete. The woman said files came through deliberately incomplete back then, like someone was hiding something." David was quiet for a moment. "Come home. Let's talk about this as a family." Brittany ended the call and sat, watching the last light fade. She felt like she was standing at the edge of something vast and dark. The note with Detective Sullivan's number sat in her pocket. She could call him. Start an official investigation. Force the truth into the light. But what if the truth destroyed everything? She drove home through the darkness, May 14th, 1999, 16 years earlier. Caldwell, Idaho. Jennifer Mason had planned a perfect afternoon for her daughter's 3rd birthday. They would go to Riverside Park, Jennifer, Melissa, and her older son Tyler, who was 7. She had packed cupcakes with pink frosting, Melissa's favorite. The weather was beautiful. Warm sun, light breeze. Other families filled the playground, children running and laughing. Melissa wore her pink shirt with butterflies. Her blonde hair was pulled back in 2 small pigtails. She ran straight for the baby swings, calling for her mother to push her. Jennifer pushed the swing gently, watching her daughter's face light up. Tyler was on the climbing structure, showing off for other boys. Tyler called from across the playground, "Mom, watch this!" Jennifer turned her head to look, saw her son hanging upside down from the monkey bars, called out encouragement, turned back to the swing. The swing was empty. For a moment, Jennifer's mind could not process what she was seeing. The swing moved slightly, chains creaking, but Melissa was not there. She looked around quickly. Melissa was not at the climbing structure, not on the slide, not by the sandbox. "Melissa!" Her voice came out sharp with panic. Other parents looked up. "My daughter. She was just here." Jennifer started running, checked behind equipment, around the bathroom building, near the parking lot. Shouted Melissa's name over and over. Tyler came down from the climbing structure, confused. "What's wrong? Where's your sister?" "I don't know. She was on the swing." Other parents joined the search. Someone called 911. Within 10 minutes, police cars arrived with sirens blaring. Officers spread out across the playground. They asked Jennifer to describe what Melissa was wearing. Pink butterfly shirt, blue jeans, white sneakers, blonde hair in pigtails, 3 years old. Small scar above her left eyebrow from a fall when she was 18 months old. Detective Sarah Morrison took Jennifer's statement while other officers searched, asked if there was anyone who might have taken Melissa, a custody dispute, an angry relative. Jennifer answered through tears. No custody issues. Her husband Daniel worked construction and was at a job site across town. No relatives nearby. No one who would do this. The search continued through the afternoon and into evening. Volunteers joined. They walked through yards, checked abandoned buildings, looked in drainage ditches. By nightfall, Melissa Mason had been missing for 8 hours. The FBI arrived the next morning. Melissa's photo was distributed to every news station. Jennifer stood in front of cameras with Daniel beside her, begging whoever had taken their daughter to bring her home. Days passed, then weeks. Every lead was investigated. None led anywhere. After 6 months, the case went cold. Melissa Mason's file went into a drawer with other missing children. But Jennifer Mason did not stop searching. She printed flyers and posted them everywhere, called the police weekly, contacted every missing children's organization in the country. Her marriage strained under the weight of grief. Daniel retreated into silence, worked longer hours, stopped talking about Melissa. Jennifer could see him pulling away but could not reach him anymore. They stayed together, but the distance between them grew wider with each passing year. Daniel slept on the couch more often than not. Jennifer spent nights in Melissa's room, surrounded by maps and timelines. Tyler grew up in the shadow of his missing sister. Started having nightmares, became quiet and withdrawn. Jennifer joined support groups for parents of missing children, met others who understood the specific torture of not knowing. Some had found their children, usually deceased, Some were still searching after decades. Every May 14th, Jennifer returned to Riverside Park, sat on the bench near the swings, and watched other children play. Wondered if somewhere her daughter was turning another year older. If you have ever lost a child, you know that grief doesn't heal with time. It changes shape, becomes something you carry, but it never disappears. Jennifer Mason kept searching, kept calling the police, kept believing that somewhere, somehow, her daughter was still alive. She never knew that Melissa was living 300 miles away in Portland, Oregon, with a new name and no memory of the afternoon she had vanished from a playground swing. Brittany arrived home late that night. Her parents were waiting in the living room. "We need to talk," David said. Brittany sat down across from them. Told them about the trip to Boise, about the worker's words, about the detective's name in her pocket. Susan was crying quietly. David looked older than he had that morning. "We didn't know," he said. "I swear, Brittany, we didn't know anything was wrong. The agency gave us paperwork. Everything looked legitimate. But it wasn't. We don't know that for sure." "Yes, we do. Deliberately incomplete. That means someone was hiding something." Susan spoke up, her voice shaking. "What are you going to do?" Brittany looked at her parents, at the two people who had raised her, who had loved her, who had given her everything. "I don't know yet," she said quietly, "but I need to find out the truth." In her pocket, the note with Detective Sullivan's number felt like it was burning through the fabric. Brittany Walsh spent 3 days staring at the detective's phone number before she found the courage to do anything with it. The note sat on her desk, then moved to her nightstand, then back to her desk. She picked it up a dozen times, set it down again, unable to decide if she was ready for whatever truth might follow that phone call. Her parents walked on eggshells around her. Susan kept asking if she was okay. David offered to take her to lunch, to talk things through. But Brittany could not talk about it yet, could not put into words the feeling that her entire life might be built on something broken. On the 4th night, she sat at her laptop and opened a search engine. Her hands hovered over the keyboard for a long moment. Then she typed, "May 14th, 1996, Idaho missing child." The results loaded slowly. When they appeared, her breath stopped. The first link was a missing persons database, maintained by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The entry showed a photograph of a small blonde girl with bright eyes and a shy smile. She wore a pink shirt with butterflies. Her hair was pulled back in 2 small pigtails. Below the photo, Melissa Ann Mason. Date of birth, May 14th, 1996. Missing, May 14th, 1999. Last seen, Riverside Park, Caldwell, Idaho. Brittany stared at the date. May 14th, 1999. The girl had vanished on her 3rd birthday, 3 years old, the same age Brittany had been when the Walshes adopted her. She clicked to enlarge the photograph, studied every detail of the small face looking back at her, the shape of the eyes, the curve of the mouth, the way the hair fell across the forehead. And there, just above the left eyebrow, a small pale scar. Brittany stood up from her desk and walked to the mirror hanging on her bedroom wall, looked at her own reflection, reached up slowly and touched the scar above her left eyebrow. The same scar, in exactly the same place. Her hand started shaking. She went back to the computer and read the full case file. Melissa Mason had disappeared from Riverside Park in Caldwell, Idaho, on May 14th, 1999, while her mother pushed her on the swings. The mother had turned away for less than a minute. When she looked back, Melissa was gone. The investigation had focused on stranger abduction. Police searched the park and surrounding areas. The FBI joined the case. Every lead was investigated. Nothing had ever been found. The case file listed Jennifer Mason as the primary contact. A phone number appeared at the bottom of the page, still active after 16 years. Brittany's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. This could not be coincidence. A missing child born on her exact birth date vanished from Idaho where her adoption originated, adopted out 3 months later under suspicious circumstances, with a scar matching her own. She was Melissa Mason. She knew it with the same certainty she knew her own name. Except her own name wasn't actually her name. Nothing about her life was what she thought it was. If you have ever discovered that your entire identity is a lie, you know the sensation of the world tilting sideways, of gravity losing its hold, of everything solid suddenly feeling like sand. Brittany went downstairs. Her parents were in the living room watching television. They looked up when she entered, and something in her face made them both stand. "What's wrong?" Susan asked. Brittany held out her laptop, the missing child page still open on the screen. "I found something." David took the computer carefully, looked at the photo of Melissa Mason. His face went pale. "Brittany, look at the birth date. May 14th, 1996. The same as mine. Look at where she went missing. Caldwell, Idaho. 3 months before you adopted me." Susan was staring at the photo now, her hand covering her mouth. "Look at the scar," Brittany said, her voice shaking. "Above her left eyebrow. The same scar I have." David set the laptop down on the coffee table, sat down heavily on the couch. "This doesn't necessarily mean anything," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Yes, it does. You know it does." Susan was crying now. "You think you're here? You think you're this missing girl?" "I don't think, I know. But the adoption was legal. We had paperwork, court orders. Everything was processed through official channels." "Deliberately incomplete channels," Brittany said. "That's what the woman at the agency told me. Files that came through deliberately incomplete. This is why. Someone took Melissa Mason from that park and gave her to you under a false identity." David looked up at his daughter. "We didn't know. I swear to you, we didn't know." "I believe you, but I need to find out the truth. I need to call the police." Susan stood up quickly. "Wait. Just wait. If you call the police, everything changes. Our family, your life, everything we've built together. Are you sure you want to do this?" "Mom, there's a woman out there who's been searching for her daughter for 16 years. If I'm that daughter, she deserves to know." "And what about us?" Susan's voice cracked. "What happens to us?" Brittany felt tears burning. "I don't know. But I can't pretend I didn't find this. I can't live with that. Our community of adoptees who uncover the truth knows that moment when you must choose between the family that raised you and the family that lost you. When loyalty pulls in 2 directions, and there is no choice that does not cause pain." The next morning, Brittany called Detective Mark Sullivan at the Boise Police Department, explained who she was, what she had found, why she believed she might be Melissa Mason. Sullivan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Can you come to Caldwell? I'd like to meet with you in person, and we'll need to arrange DNA testing." "How long does that take?" "Results usually come back in 7 to 10 days. But Ms. Walsh, I need you to understand what you're starting here. If you're right, this becomes a criminal investigation. Someone took you. Someone falsified your adoption records. There will be consequences." "I understand." "Do your parents know you're calling me?" "Yes." "Are they willing to cooperate?" "I think so." Sullivan gave her an address, asked her to come to Caldwell the following day. Brittany made the drive alone. Her parents had offered to come with her, but she needed to do this herself, needed to face whatever was coming without anyone else's fear weighing her down. The Caldwell Police Department was a low brick building near the center of town. Detective Sullivan met her in the lobby. He was in his 50s, gray hair and careful eyes. "Ms. Walsh, thank you for coming." He led her to a small conference room. A woman was waiting there, introduced as Detective Sarah Morrison. "I worked the original case," Morrison said, "when Melissa disappeared in 1999. I've reviewed the file again since Detective Sullivan contacted me." They sat down around a table. Morrison pulled out a folder thick with papers. "Tell me everything," Sullivan said. "Start with the birth certificate." Brittany went through it all. The blank spaces on the document, the trip to the agency, the worker's comment about deliberately incomplete files, the internet search that had led her to Melissa Mason's missing persons page. Morrison was taking notes. When Brittany finished, she looked up. "The scar. Can I see it?" Brittany pushed her hair back from her forehead. Morrison leaned forward, studying the small, pale line above her left eyebrow. Melissa Mason had a scar in that exact location, from a fall when she was 18 months old. 3 stitches at the emergency room. We have the medical records. Sullivan spoke up. "We'll need a DNA sample from you, and we'll need to contact Jennifer Mason for comparison." "Has anyone told her yet that I might be her daughter?" "Not yet. We don't want to give false hope if this turns out to be mistaken identity. But Ms. Walsh, I have to tell you, the similarities are striking. The birth date, the location, the timing, the scar. If you're not Melissa Mason, it's the strangest coincidence I've ever seen." A technician came in to collect the DNA sample, swabbed the inside of Brittany's cheek, sealed it in a sterile container, labeled it carefully. 7 to 10 days, Sullivan said. "We'll call you as soon as we have results." The date was May 7th, 2015. Brittany drove back to Portland in a daze. The swab had taken 30 seconds. Now she had to wait over a week to find out if her entire life was built on a kidnapping. That week felt like it lasted years. Brittany went through the motions of her normal routine. Classes, homework, shifts at her part-time job. But her mind was elsewhere, counting down hours. Her parents were gentle with her, gave her space when she needed it, sat with her when she wanted company. They did not ask what she would do if the test came back positive, did not talk about what might happen to them if the adoption was proven fraudulent. May 14th, 1999, 16 years earlier. Jennifer Mason returned home from Riverside Park that first terrible evening to a house that felt like it was suffocating her. Police were still searching. Daniel had left work early and driven straight to the park. Tyler sat on the couch with a neighbor, too young to understand what was happening, but old enough to know something was terribly wrong. Jennifer could not sit still. Walked from room to room, expecting any moment to hear Melissa's voice calling for her. Kept going to the window to look outside, certain her daughter would come running up the driveway. But the driveway stayed empty. Daniel came home after midnight. His face told her they had not found anything. They sat in the kitchen, not speaking. What was there to say? Their daughter had vanished from a public park in broad daylight. The next days blurred together. FBI agents came to the house, asked Jennifer and Daniel the same questions over and over, checked their backgrounds, administered polygraph tests. Both passed. "We're not suspects," Daniel said after the agents left. "They're just being thorough." But Jennifer felt like a suspect, felt like the entire world was watching her, judging her for the moment she had looked away. The investigation expanded outward. Police searched the entire town, checked every empty building, every vehicle, every possible place a 3-year-old could be hidden. Found nothing. Melissa's face appeared on news broadcasts across Idaho. Jennifer stood in front of cameras begging whoever had taken her daughter to bring her back. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "She's just a baby. She needs her family. If you have her, please let her go. No questions asked. Just bring her home." Days turned into weeks. The massive search effort scaled back. Volunteers returned to their normal lives. The FBI moved on to other cases. Jennifer's phone stopped ringing with updates. After 3 months, Detective Morrison came to the house and told them gently that the case was being transferred to cold case status. "We're not giving up," Morrison said, "but the active investigation has run its course. If new evidence surfaces, we'll pursue it immediately." Jennifer nodded numbly. She knew what cold case status meant. It meant they were done looking. It meant Melissa was just another name in a file, another face on a poster, another child who had vanished without a trace. But Jennifer was not done looking. She printed flyers with Melissa's photo and drove to every town within 100 miles, taped them to telephone poles, left them at grocery stores and gas stations, handed them to anyone who would take one. She called Detective Morrison every week, asking if there were updates. The answer was always the same. No new leads, no credible sightings, nothing. Daniel retreated into silence, worked longer hours, stopped coming home for dinner, started sleeping on the couch, claiming he could not get comfortable in their bed. Jennifer knew he was pulling away but could not reach him anymore. The space between them grew wider with each passing month. Tyler started having nightmares, would wake up screaming that he had seen Melissa in the park. Jennifer would hold him until he fell back asleep, then lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. Jennifer joined a support group for parents of missing children, met other mothers and fathers who understood the specific torture of not knowing. Some of their children had been found deceased. Some were still missing after 10, 15, 20 years. One woman named Patricia told Jennifer about her daughter who had been missing for 12 years before her body was found in another state. "At least I know now," Patricia said. "At least I can stop wondering." Jennifer could not imagine that kind of relief. Could not imagine being grateful to know her daughter was dead. If you have ever lived in the space between hope and despair, where every day brings the possibility of news but no news ever comes, you know the exhaustion that settles into your bones, the way time both drags and flies, the way you exist in two worlds simultaneously, the one where your child is alive somewhere, and the one where they are gone forever. Years passed. Melissa's 4th birthday came and went, her 5th, her 6th. Jennifer bought a cake every year, lit candles, sang happy birthday to an empty chair. Daniel finally moved out when Melissa had been gone for 5 years. Did not ask for a divorce, just said he needed space. Rented an apartment across town. Called occasionally to check on Tyler, but never asked about the search. Jennifer converted Melissa's bedroom into a command center. Covered the walls with maps and timelines and copies of police reports. Aged Melissa's photo every year using forensic software, showing what she might look like at 4, at 5, at 6. Tyler graduated from middle school, then high school, left for college at 18, visited on holidays but never stayed long. The house held too many ghosts for him. Jennifer kept searching, contacted every missing children's organization, checked online databases daily, called Detective Morrison every year on the anniversary of Melissa's disappearance. Every May 14th, she returned to Riverside Park, sat on the bench near the swings, watched other children play, wondered if somewhere her daughter was turning another year older. 16 years passed this way. Jennifer's hair turned gray. Her hands developed arthritis from years of typing searches and printing flyers. But she never stopped believing that Melissa was alive somewhere. Daniel remained in Caldwell, but they rarely spoke. The marriage existed on paper only, neither of them bothering to finalize a divorce. What did it matter? The life they had built together had ended the day Melissa disappeared. In 2015, on the 16th anniversary of Melissa's disappearance, Jennifer sat alone in Riverside Park as she did every year. She was 53 years old. had spent more than a third of her life searching for a daughter who had been 3 the last time she saw her. A young mother pushed her toddler on the swings nearby. The little girl laughed, her blonde pigtails bouncing. Jennifer watched them and felt the familiar ache that never quite went away. Her phone rang. Detective Sullivan from the Boise Police Department. Jennifer's heart jumped the way it always did when police called, even though it was usually just courtesy check-ins. "Mrs. Mason, I need you to come to the station today. There's been a development in Melissa's case." Jennifer's hand started shaking. "What kind of development?" "I'd rather explain in person. Can you come in this afternoon?" "Yes, I'm coming now." She drove to the police station with her heart pounding. 16 years of waiting. 16 years of silence. And now, on the anniversary of the worst day of her life, a development. She did not let herself hope. Had learned years ago that hope was dangerous. But she could not stop the small voice in the back of her mind whispering, "Maybe. Maybe this time?" Maybe after 16 years of searching, she was finally about to find out what had happened to her daughter. Jennifer Mason walked into the Caldwell Police Department on May 14, 2015, 16 years to the day since her daughter had vanished from Riverside Park. Her hands were shaking. Her mind raced through possibilities, most of them terrible. Bodies found. Remains identified. The call every parent of a missing child dreads and needs in equal measure. Detective Sullivan met her in the lobby. He looked different than she remembered, older and grayer, but then again so was she. 16 years changed everyone. "Mrs. Mason, thank you for coming. What's happened? Have you found something? Let's talk in my office." He led her down a hallway to a small room. Detective Morrison was already there, the woman who had worked Melissa's case from the beginning. Jennifer's stomach dropped. They would not have called both detectives unless this was serious. "Please sit down," Sullivan said. Jennifer sat. Her hands were shaking. "Just tell me, is she alive?" "We believe so, yes." The room tilted. Jennifer gripped the arms of her chair. "You found her?" "A young woman came to us a week ago. She had reason to believe she might be Melissa. We collected DNA samples from both of you. The results came back this morning." Sullivan opened a folder on his desk, pulled out a document with official laboratory letterhead. "It's a match, Mrs. Mason. The young woman is your daughter. Melissa is alive." Jennifer could not breathe, could not speak, just stared at the detective. "She's been living in Portland, Oregon under a false identity. She was adopted in 1999 through fraudulent channels. She discovered inconsistencies in her adoption records and came to us herself." "Where is she?" Jennifer whispered. "She's here, in the building. She came back to Caldwell this morning when we called to tell her the results were in. Mrs. Mason, your daughter is alive. Would you like to see her?" Jennifer could not speak, could only nod. Sullivan stood up. "I need to prepare you. She's 19 years old now. She's been living as someone else for 16 years. She doesn't remember you. This is going to be difficult." "I don't care. I just want to see her." Sullivan left the room, came back a few minutes later with a young woman. Tall, blonde, 19 years old. The same blue eyes Jennifer remembered. The same small scar above her left eyebrow. Jennifer stood up slowly, looked at her daughter. At the 3-year-old child who had vanished from Riverside Park, now grown into a young woman she did not recognize. "Melissa?" The young woman's voice was shaking. "I don't remember you. I'm sorry. My name is Brittany, but the DNA says I'm your daughter." Jennifer crossed the room and wrapped her arms around the girl who had been missing for 16 years, held her tight, sobbed into her shoulder. "I never stopped looking," Jennifer whispered. "Never, not for one day." Brittany stood stiff at first. Then slowly her arms came up, held this woman who had searched for 16 years, who had never given up, who had believed when everyone else said to let go. "I'm sorry," Brittany said. "I don't remember." "It's okay. You were 3. But you're here. You're alive. That's all that matters. If you have ever tried to bridge 16 years of absence in a single embrace, you know how inadequate words become, how love and loss exist in the same space." Brittany had driven to Caldwell that morning with her parents. Detective Sullivan had called at 7 a.m. saying the DNA results were in and asking her to come to the station. The 3-hour drive had felt like the longest of her life. David and Susan Walsh waited in another conference room while Brittany met her biological mother. Sullivan had explained they would need to be interviewed as part of the criminal investigation. After Jennifer and Brittany's initial meeting, Sullivan brought them all together to explain what would happen next. "We're opening a criminal investigation into how Melissa was taken and how her adoption was falsified. Mr. and Mrs. Walsh, we'll need to examine all your adoption paperwork. We'll need detailed statements about how you came to adopt Brittany, Melissa." David spoke up. "We'll cooperate fully. We had no idea the adoption was fraudulent." Sullivan nodded. "We believe you, but we need to understand how the network operated, how they made it look legitimate enough that you didn't question it." The investigation moved quickly. FBI agents reopened the case as a kidnapping and fraudulent adoption. Detectives traced the paperwork back to Idaho Children's Services and discovered a network that had operated through the 1990s. Hospital workers had identified vulnerable children, babies born to young mothers, to addicts, to women without support systems. A social worker named Helen Marsh had falsified documents. Adoptive parents paid fees that went into private accounts. The children's identities were erased and rebuilt. The network had operated for nearly a decade before authorities began investigating in 1998. By then, dozens of children had been placed through fraudulent channels. When Melissa Mason was taken from Riverside Park in May 1999, the network was collapsing under scrutiny. Someone had panicked. The FBI had started tracking missing children back to Idaho placements. Taking Melissa was not about profit. It was about hiding evidence. Helen Marsh had falsified Melissa's adoption papers in August 1999, 3 months after she was taken. Had given her to the Walshes through channels that looked legitimate on the surface. The Walshes had paid standard adoption fees, received official court documents, believed everything was legal. Helen Marsh had died in 2007. 2 hospital workers had moved out of state and could not be located. The man who had taken Melissa from the park was never identified. Police suspected he had been hired by the network to remove a child they needed to disappear. David and Susan Walsh were cleared of criminal charges. The evidence showed they had genuinely believed the adoption was legal. The paperwork had been convincing. The agency had seemed legitimate. They were victims of the fraud. But the court terminated their parental rights immediately. Melissa was a kidnapping victim, taken from her biological family. The law required her return. Jennifer took her daughter home to Caldwell, to the small house where Melissa's room still existed exactly as it had been 16 years earlier. Pink walls, stuffed animals on shelves, a bed that had never been slept in after that last night in May 1999. The transition was brutal. Brittany had lost the only parents she had ever known. Jennifer had gained back a daughter who was now a stranger. They moved around each other carefully, trying to build something from nothing. Tyler came home from college the week after Melissa returned, met his sister who did not remember him, looked at this 19-year-old woman, and tried to see the 3-year-old he had been playing near when she vanished. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry I wasn't watching you that day." Melissa looked at this man who was supposed to be her brother. "You were 7. It wasn't your fault." "I've thought about it every day for 16 years. They sat at the dinner table that first night, the three of them, pretending to be a family. The silence was heavy with everything they could not say. Brittany kept in touch with the Walshes, called Susan every week, visited David on weekends when she could. They were still her parents, even if the law no longer recognized it. Jennifer tried not to be hurt by this, tried to understand that 16 years could not be erased in a few months, but every time, Brittany called Susan. "Mom." Jennifer felt the loss all over again. Daniel came to the house the week after Melissa returned, stood in the doorway looking at the daughter he had not seen since she was 3. He had aged badly, gray hair, tired eyes, shoulders permanently slumped. "Melissa," he said quietly. She did not remember him either, did not know this man who was supposed to be her father. "I'm sorry," Daniel said. "I'm sorry I gave up. I'm sorry I stopped looking." Jennifer watched from the kitchen. She and Daniel had not spoken more than necessary in years. Their marriage existed only on paper, a legal formality neither had bothered to dissolve. "You didn't give up," Jennifer said. "You just couldn't keep going. That's different." Daniel looked at his wife across the years of distance. "You never stopped." "No, I didn't." Finding Melissa did not bring them back together. The space between them had grown too wide. But it gave them something they had both lost. Closure. Daniel started visiting once a week, trying to know his daughter, trying to rebuild something that had never existed for her. The first few months were the hardest. Melissa struggled with her identity, called herself Brittany sometimes, Melissa other times, unsure which name felt right. Had nightmares about being taken from the Walshes, woke up crying for Susan. Jennifer held her daughter through those nights, even though each one felt like a knife. This was the grief she had been spared when Melissa was 3, the conscious, articulate loss of a child old enough to understand what was happening. "I know you miss them," Jennifer said one night after Melissa had cried herself to sleep, and then woken again. "I know this isn't fair to you, but you're my daughter, and I'm trying to be your mother even though I missed 16 years. "I don't know how to be your daughter," Melissa whispered. "Then we'll figure it out together." 2 years after being found, Melissa legally changed her name back to Melissa Ann Mason. Started using it consistently. It still felt strange, but she forced herself to claim it. This was who she was. Not Brittany Walsh. That girl had never really existed. She enrolled in community college in Caldwell, studied psychology, wanted to understand trauma, memory, identity, wanted to make sense of what had happened to her. She saw a therapist who specialized in recovered missing persons, talked about the guilt she felt for not remembering, for loving the Walshes more than Jennifer, for feeling like an imposter in her own life. "You were 3 years old when you were taken," the therapist said. "Your brain was still developing. The fact that you don't remember doesn't mean you're broken." "But she searched for 16 years, and I don't even remember her face. That's not your fault, and it doesn't make her sacrifice any less meaningful." 3 years after being found, Melissa wrote an article for a national magazine about recovered missing persons. The article ended with this: "I was 3 years old when I was taken from a playground. I was 19 when I was found. I lost 16 years. Someone stole me and gave me to people who believed they were adopting legally. Those people raised me with love. They are not villains, they are victims too. But that does not erase what happened. I was kidnapped. My identity was erased. My mother searched for me for 16 years while I lived under a false name 300 miles away. I don't remember her. I don't remember my brother. I don't remember the afternoon I vanished. Those memories are gone." But I remember the moment I found my own face on a missing persons website. Remember the shock of realizing my entire life was built on a crime. My name is Melissa Ann Mason. I was stolen. But I was found. If you're searching for someone, don't stop. Don't give up. Don't let anyone tell you it's been too long, because my mother searched for 16 years. And she found me. That's what matters. Not the time lost, not the memories gone, but the fact that she never stopped looking. And neither should you. If this story reminds you that some missing children do come home, that mothers who refuse to give up sometimes get their daughters back, that hope can survive 16 years of silence, remember this. Criminal networks that steal children and erase their identities deserve no mercy. The people who took Melissa Mason from that playground, who gave her a false name and destroyed 2 families, committed one of the cruelest crimes imaginable. Some of them died before justice could reach them. Some disappeared. Some will never be found. But Melissa was found, and her mother's 16 years of searching were not in vain. Someone is still missing. Someone is still searching. Don't stop looking. Don't stop hoping. Because Melissa Mason came home, and her story belongs to every mother who refuses to give up.